Hello, students of history, and welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the rise of Adolf Hitler to become first the Chancellor of Germany and then the Dictator of Germany in 1933 and 1934. So this is all taking place earlier, though, in history as Hitler's on his rise to power. And he starts this process right after World War I ends, because Germany is a cluster after World War I. They're an absolute disastrous mess because of the Treaty of Versailles. So we'll get a little review of the Treaty of Versailles to some extent, but also I want you to keep in mind that this, again, is a fascist movement that is spreading throughout Europe at this time. And Hitler is very keenly watching the efforts of Benito Mussolini in Italy, who in 1922, after being elected to be the prime minister of Italy, is going to have his march on Rome to take over the government, in which he is going to dispel any other parties, make them illegal, and now he is in charge and building Italy in the fascist image. So Hitler's watching this take place in the early 1920s, and he's thinking, I can do it but better. Germany, after World War I, was struck by a series of hammer blows. They had the economic problems of the Treaty of Versailles with rampant inflation and deflation of their money, inflation of their prices, and the reparations payments that were due all to Europe. And so this is a very difficult time period for the government. They're inherently flawed and weak at this point in Weimar Germany, right? The Weimar Republic. But on top of that, you've got these revolutionary movements. Now, whether it's the Spartacus Uprising, as it was called, which was a bunch of commies that wanted to overthrow the government, or soon Hitler and the National Socialists that want to overthrow the government, we've got a pissed off group of Germans that are ready to overthrow this government that is not functional. And Hitler is one of those guys. Now, we'll get more into how Hitler comes into this role, but first I want to dispel any myths that there might be about Adolf Hitler that you've heard, and there's just a few popular myths that I'll go through today, and certainly there are more, but here's a few popular myths about Adolf Hitler that I want us to discuss in a little game that I like to call Hitler, ja, nein, oder wer wissen nicht? So in this game, I will give you the myth, and to it you will say, ja, it's true, nein, it is not true, or wir wissen nicht, we're not entirely sure, based on what we know about Hitler. So get ready, here we go. Tally up your scores too while we're doing this. I'll know if you're getting 100% or not. So the first myth that we have today is that Hitler was Jewish. Wouldn't that be ironic? So is it ja, nein, or wir wissen nicht? Not sure. Well, you're probably safest to say 9 on this one. No, that is not true. It was a myth made up about Hitler after the fact, because as Hitler and the Nazis are talking about how terrible Jews are and saying they should be illegalized as citizens, some of his political opponents, remember this is a guy that's running for election, he's running for the German Reichstag. There will be many people that don't like him that are going to say, you know, he's lying, he's actually Jewish, that's why he hates Jews so much, but his dad's a bastard, so we'll never know for sure. Well, here's the thing. His dad is named Eloy Heidler. Now, that wasn't his original name. Let's go back a little bit, okay? Hitler's grandma is a lovely lady by the name of Frau Schicklgruber, and she was a saucy little minx, all right? So this random vagrant comes wandering through her town in Austria. She makes eyes at him. They have some chemistry. They scootily poop, and all of a sudden, she's pregnant. And so he moves on. He's a wandering vagrant. He keeps moving to the next town. And do we know anything about this man? No, we don't. All we know is he was a homeless guy that went into her town, knocked her up, and then left. What a guy. And so she is now pregnant with Eloy, who is Hitler's father. Now, his name at birth is Schicklgruber, which, just imagine if Hitler had kept that name, if he had been, Adolf Schicklgruber, think of how much more hilarious history would be as people were saying Sieg Heil Mein Schicklgruber or something like that. But that's not the case. And the reason is because Hitler's father was a bastard, and he could not get a good job, would not be well accepted in Austrian society in the 19th century if he was a bastard. So what he did was he was adopted by his uncle. His uncle was named Heidler, and later that will be Germanized to the name Hitler. And so therefore, Hitler takes that name. So is he Jewish? No, he's not, as far as we know, unless that wandering vagrant in some weird chance of history was Jewish. But that was a myth that was made up by his political opponents. So you saw the picture that just went by there. It's a lovely photo of Adolf Hitler practicing before a speech. We're going to get a number of those as we go through here with some funny pictures of Adolf Hitler practicing for his speeches, so I hope you enjoy them. All right, now the next myth that we have is that Hitler hated Jews because of the way a Jew treated him in his early life. That one is ja, 9, oder wer wissen nicht. That one is 9 on this occasion. All right, so Adolf Hitler hated Jews because many people hated Jews at this time. I mean, you think about it. Going throughout Jewish history, they've been an often hated people for religious reasons because they crucified Christ, but I don't think that's the real reason. I think the reason that people hated Jews so much and blamed them and scapegoated them for so many different things is because this is a people that freed themselves from bondage. Go back to the Moses story. They freed themselves from bondage at the hands of the Egyptians, and they stuck it to the Egyptians, this ultimate powerhouse in the ancient world, and became a free people and fought for their existence against all odds, claiming to be God's chosen, right? And so this is something that, put a target on their back throughout world history. And the problem with anti-Semitism is it's just absolute trash. It's garbage, in which people claim that all of the problems of the modern world are because of Jews that are internationally conspiring to ruin the human race. It's trash. But that's why Hitler hated Jews, was because it was politically expedient for him. It made sense to him. It was racial science that we hopefully can all accept as absolute garbage today, but at the time made sense to him and so many other people. And we might claim that Germany, they're the only anti-Semites out there. That is so false, because if you look back through American history, the KKK had millions of members, all of whom hated Jews. That's part of being part of that club of the Ku Klux Klan. France was actually one of the most anti-Semitic countries in the world at this time, and Russia is the most anti-Semitic country in the world. They set the records because they just hated Jews so much at this time. So Germany is just one of those many countries that has these weirdos out there that believe in Judaism not just as a religious thing, but as a racial science. And it's garbage, and we know that now, but unfortunately people didn't think that at the time in many cases. All right, another possible myth here. Hitler had an alliance with Pope Pius XII before and during World War II. That is 9 as well, not true. And there's actually a book that has been written called Hitler's Pope. And in it talks about how the Pope in Rome did nothing to resist the Holocaust, and in fact might have even helped Hitler in the Holocaust and helped Hitler with other policies that were going on at the time. Not true, because the Pope was actually singularly responsible for helping thousands of escaped Jews and escaped refugees in Europe to use the catacombs of the Vatican to escape persecution and escape even out of Europe itself to find safety somewhere else. So especially as we're reading Beneath the Scarlet Sky, you're going to see the role of the Catholic Church in trying to promote subtle, quiet resistance and sometimes overt and active resistance against Hitler and the Nazis. So this one, also a myth. 9. All right, next one. Hitler had 2 testicles. 9 on this occasion as well. Fun fact, Hitler in World War I was wounded a couple of times, and one of those times was when a piece of shrapnel went through his left nut, and so took out the left nut, and he was wounded and bleeding profusely, so a doctor in a field hospital had to remove the left nut, and then he put it in a jar for later, and sewed up his ball sack again, and so Hitler only has 1. He's a uniballer. Now, here's the really key question of the day, okay? Hitler was crazy or insane? That one is definitely 9, not true. And I absolutely hate it. I want everyone to know this. I absolutely hate it when people say that Hitler was a lunatic, that he was insane, that he was somehow mentally ill, because these are things that in our American court system would make him not guilty of his crimes. If you say he's insane, you're making him not guilty of his crimes. He knew what he was doing. But here's what's worse. I hate it when people say that the Germans were somehow brainwashed into thinking that they had to follow Hitler. Maybe later in World War II, when things were really bad, that could have been true because resistance was so futile against people like the Gestapo. But at the same time, in the rise of Hitler in the 20s and 30s, people brought him to power. Germans brought him to power because they wanted him in power. Now, that's not to speak for everybody, but remember that the fascists and the Nazis will use a combination of persuasion and intimidation. And persuasion was ultimately what brought Hitler and the Nazis to power. The reason that this happened was because Hitler claimed to have all of the answers, and therefore people were willing to listen to him. That's what brought him to power. Later, of course, there were the secret police that were scaring people, but in his rise to power, the Germans brought him to power because they wanted him. He seemed to have the answers. And here's why. Germany, after the Treaty of Versailles, was an absolute disaster. The Weimar Republic, as it was called, was what replaced the Kaiserreich. The Kaiserreich was old school Germany before World War I that had a Kaiser or an emperor and then had an empire. That's been destroyed by World War I. So now the Weimar Republic is weak and inherently flawed from the beginning because they're the ones that signed the Treaty of Versailles, which is going to destroy so much of Germany in terms of they'll lose land, they'll lose their military, they will lose their navy, their economy is in the tank as well, and that's the most important problem right now. People can't eat. So who do they blame? They blame the government. And reparations is causing rampant inflation to the point where by the time we get to November of 1923, when Hitler is going to stage his beer hall putsch, or his coup to overthrow the government, the inflation rate at that point was 3.25 billion%, and prices were doubling every 49 hours. So there's good reason to hate the government and think that some radical like Hitler might have the answers. All right, there's a bunch of men at this time, too, that are called the Freikorps. The Freikorps are these out-of-work soldiers after World War I who, because of the Treaty of Versailles making it so that the German army could be no larger than 100,000 men, it used to be 5 million before the war, and now and then even after the war, there's still millions and millions of men. These guys are all now unemployed. And what are they really good at? They're good at fighting, they're good at killing. They're not good at as many other things. And so now it's like they're unemployed and they're looking for a way to make their daily bread. So they'll hire themselves out essentially as political mercenaries. And these guys are going to become the ruffians that will form the group known as the Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiter Party, also known as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazis. Before the war, Adolf Hitler, what he wanted to do was be an artist. He really wanted to be an artist. His dad didn't want him to be an artist. His dad dies, and so Hitler's like, screw you, Dad, I'm going to go be an artist in Vienna. And so he applies to art school by sending in works like these. You can see it's really a beautiful impressionist style painting. It's quite lovely, done with a lot of skill. I mean, you think about how much these paintings are worth today. I mean, if I'm going to hang that in my home, though, I'm going to throw a whole lot of holy water on it and pray to God that the demons stay away. But still, that's a pretty nice painting. I mean, it's not bad, right? And so Adolf Hitler was applying to art school, but he got turned down. Twice, in fact. The art school of Vienna just the first time said, no, you're not good enough, and then the second time didn't even respond to him. So at that point, Hitler went into a deep depression, and he started trying to sell his art on the streets. He contemplated suicide on several occasions, and then he spent a lot of time wandering the streets as a homeless vagrant. And while he was in Vienna, he encountered for the first time anti-Semitism as a belief. And he started to think about the power of anti-Semitism, and it will lead him down this dark path. Now, once World War I gets started, he is no longer going to be in Vienna, but he's in Munich at this point. And while in Munich, the war announcement goes off. And when he was there, he is absolutely excited about the chance to go to war. You can see him here. He looks like a kid that is about to enter into Disneyland, and he's just got this look of awe and excitement about him, just so thrilled, because for him, war is the ultimate calling. While in war, he's going to serve in a pretty heroic role, a very dangerous role of being a trench runner. Now, you notice the longer mustache there. That's not going to work for long, because when he puts a gas mask on, he's unable to get a tight, airtight squeeze on his neck, and so therefore he's going to suffer some gas poisoning toward the end of the war, which convinces him to shave the mustache down to that nasty pencil stash that he gets instead. He wasn't a real well-liked guy while he was in the military, but this is going to be part of his formative development. This is what teaches him all about where he wants to go next. After the war, he's actually going to be unemployed and ask for a job from the military and say, I'll do anything. Just give me a job back in the military, because that's what he feels is his calling, his life's purpose. So the military actually gave him a job to go and spy on these radical nationalist groups that had been forming all over Munich by hanging out in the beer halls. The beer halls are the ultimate meeting place at this time, because beer halls, they would often give out free beer and a slice of bread, which are tough to come by. They cost billions of Deutschmarks at this point to get either one of those. So they give out free stuff if you come in and smoke and drink and you listen to a political speaker. And there was this party called the Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiter Party that Adolf Hitler was sent to go spy on. And while he was there, he started to love the ideas he was hearing. So he became their 7th founding member. He became the initial head of propaganda, and part of his role was to make art for the Nazi Party to get people's attention, and so he will make the swastika as the result, and to be one of their speakers. And he had the power of his voice. He had the power to speak. If there's one thing that's going to aid Adolf Hitler in his rise to power, it's his ability to speak and to put people's fears and ideas into words in ways that they want to hear them. So he will use this power of speech to gain a following in Munich, and the plan is that during the worst time in Germany's history economically, November of 1923, because of the rampant inflation, Hitler and the Nazis said it's time for something bold. What we're going to do is take over the government of Munich. Then, because Munich is like kind of the capital of that state in Bavaria, southern Germany, then we're going to march all the way from Munich to Berlin and take over the head of the government, the head capital city, and overthrow the Weimar Republic in a dramatic coup d'etat. So that's the plan. The coup d'etat, that's French. Putsch is the German word for it. They're going to overthrow the government by marching about 900 miles all the way to Berlin. And it's going to work splendidly. Or not, okay? They're going to get shot to pieces, and it's going to fail miserably. But what it will do is land Hitler in a prison cell. Let's take a look now at a video. So Hitler, in his beer hall putsch, is trying to do exactly what Mussolini did, but he's doing it through less legal methods because he's just going straight for the putsch, the coup d'etat. Well, he decides after this failed attempt that the only way to gain power of Germany is to do it legally, through a democratic process, to get elected, to make the Nazi Party a legitimate political party that can rise to power and then suspend democracy and get rid of any powers that disagree, or any political parties that disagree. So that's his plan now. Now he formulates that plan while he's in prison. And while in prison, he's going to write his book, Mein Kampf. So Mein Kampf means my struggle. And in this book, it's a rambling, nasty treatise. I don't know if you've ever tried to read it at all, but fun fact about the book, it actually, after World War II, it's not a hot seller at all. In fact, Barnes & Noble carries it. It's kind of embarrassing to buy that book and, bring it up to the check register. But the publishers of this book actually found that it dramatically started to sell a lot more copies when downloadable versions were available in Kindle, because there's that curiosity of people that want to know what's in it. Well, within it is the entire plan that Hitler is trying to pursue and plans to pursue. And so I hate that myth, again, a myth of people that said, we didn't know what Hitler was going to do. We didn't know how bad of a man he could become or what his plans were for world domination. Of course they knew, because Mein Kampf was a hot seller in the 1920s and then again in the 1930s when he comes to power. It's a book that's taught, once Hitler is in power, taught to all school children. It's given out as a wedding present to every newly married couple. It's a book that changes the world because it's not just in Germany either. People that are, intrigued by fascism and Nazism in other countries, it's translated into French and English, and it will be spread all throughout the world as a hot seller in some of these countries to appeal to these kinds of same ideas. Within this book, he's got the ideas of, for instance, that he wants pure blood and more soil. All right, so blood and soil are key themes of his racial perspective and his future plans. Adolf Hitler said that the blood that he's talking about are the Aryan and the Volk. We'll start with Aryan, the stupid racial idea that they're an ancient group that established Western civilization. They're the Nordic peoples, the best, most fit peoples who are blonde-haired, blue-eyed. And therefore, they're like the A squad. They're the varsity squad, winning the state championships, right? Well, you might notice when you look at Adolf Hitler, he doesn't really fit the bill, does he? He's brown-haired, brown-eyed. That doesn't look like he's Aryan. Well, that's because he's the secondary group, the Volk. Volk means people in German. And so you might recognize the term Volk from Volkswagen. Volkswagen, a popular car company still today, was actually started in Germany during the Nazi reign because they said we need to have a people's car, a Volkswagen, people's wagon, so that anybody can have access to a car. It's kind of the Germans' Model T, all right, which was also a hot seller, of course, in America at this time. So the Volk, or the people, are like Hitler. They're brown-eyed, they're brown-haired, they have pure bloodline. fine. You can prove your purity of blood by indicating that there's absolutely no Judaism or any other inferior races mixed in with you. Because Hitler and the Nazis wanted to see the expansion of these ideal groups of people as a chosen race. And because of that, Hitler argued that the Germans need more living room, as it's called, or living space. That's a German term that we call Lebensraum, not to be confused with Lebensraum, because Lebensraum means loving room, which has a very different connotation. But Lebensraum is Eastern European territories that Hitler writes in his book they plan to steal from the Untermensch, or the subhuman Slavic peoples. All right, the Slavs, the Poles, the Russians, these are people that don't deserve that land. And so Lebensraum becomes synonymous with what in America we would call manifest destiny, meaning that the Germans, because their population is growing with their ideal human race of Vulcanarian, we're going to spread out there into the eastern territories and claim that land as our living space, or manifest destiny. Now, these are ideals that very much appeal to Germans at the time, along with the idea of anti-Semitism. Remember that anti-Semitism is a popular belief not just in Germany. In fact, it was more popular in places like Austria, Russia, France. It was very popular in England and America at this time as well. My point being that it's not just the Germans who are coming up with this, and it's not an idea that's unique to Hitler. Hitler is basically plagiarizing every other anti-Semitic racial theorist of the era, and he's getting his ideas from, America, for instance. The United States had already used a lot of their racial experiments and their eugenic policies and their racial science, like phrenology, junk science, it's not real science, but phrenology on slaves. And so the whole isolation of Jews as an inferior race was something that Hitler and the Nazis saw happening in America in the 19th century and under Jim Crowism in the 19th and 20th century, and said we can do it better, but this time against the Jews because they are the ones that are fearful. The idea that was for anti-Semites that Jews were to blame for all of the problems of the modern world. If you've got bad art that's out there, like Dadaist or abstract art, or you've got porn coming out of Hollywood, those terrible films, that's because of Jewish artists and filmmakers. If you've got liberal ideas out there, that's got to be the Jews that are at fault for that. If you've got things like a Great Depression that's looming at this point, that's because Jewish bankers ruined our banking system and brought on the Great Depression, and they're trying to make money off of it. If you've got problems of, for instance, sickness, like the Black Death throughout history, or the Spanish influenza, it's because Jewish doctors got everybody sick. If you've got women that are having children out of wedlock and they don't know who the father is, it must have been a Jewish doctor that impregnated them and raped them. These are stupid ideas, but unfortunately they're so popular amongst Europeans at this time. It is a popular racist idea. There was a very dramatic situation in Germany in which there's a Great Depression. There's no one that can seem to fix the problem because the person in charge at this point was Paul von Hindenburg. You want to write that name down. Paul von Hindenburg. He's a review from World War I. He was the president of Germany. Now, he is in control of a lot in Germany right now, but really the people that are running the show politically is the Reichstag, okay? The Reichstag, they're the political organization, kind of like Congress for us today, or Parliament in England. So we have a president that has certain abilities, and then a Reichstag that's supposed to do the rest. Germany, with their Reichstag and their political process, is different from America, where in America we have a two-party system, where it's Republicans and Democrats. Now there's fringes on either side, there's occasionally a third party that tries to do things, but really it's Democrats and Republicans, and from that we get a direct election process, where if we cast enough votes for this one particular leader, that leader becomes our House of Representatives representative, or our senator, because we voted for him with a majority. Okay, now in Germany it's different, where you cast a vote for a party. Now, there are a lot of parties. There were like 13 or 14 different parties, legitimate parties. There's even more on the fringes, but there's 13 or 14 different parties that are running for office seats in the Reichstag. And then when you cast your vote in Germany, you vote for the Nazi party, or you vote for the center party. And as you vote for them, those seats are then divvied out to representatives from that party. So let's say the Nazis get 49% of the vote. I'm not voting for one person in particular in the party, like Hermann Göring or Adolf Hitler or Rudolf Hess. I'm voting for the party itself. They then give out that number of seats to based on the percentage of how many votes they got. Now, if you've got a majority, then you're in charge. But if you don't, you have to form what's called a coalition. Now, I know this is kind of complicated stuff. It'll make more sense when you guys do a little web quest about it. But let's just say that that the Nazis, by the time we get into 1932, have got almost a majority. 49% of the electorate is going to go to the Nazis. So they can't quite get that 50% and appoint Adolf Hitler as the leader of the Reichstag. So instead what will happen is Paul von Hindenburg, who has been ruling by emergency decree, and is going to say, you know what, we need someone to lay the smackdown and run this government properly. Adolf Hitler's the guy to do it. So he makes it so that Adolf Hitler becomes the chancellor of the Reichstag. And everyone kind of trusts this thing at the moment because they're thinking, well, Hitler's kind of a radical weirdo, but at the same time, he's got a lot of answers to questions I've got. And Paul von Hindenburg, as long as he's there, can keep him in check. Well, then Paul von Hindenburg dies. He dies a year after Hitler, roughly a year after Hitler comes to power as the chancellor. All right, so that's where Hitler is going to have his path laid to become the dictator of Germany. So in January of 1933, President Paul von Hindenburg appoints Hitler as Chancellor of the Reichstag, a vocab term you need to know. Reichstag meaning their parliament or their Congress. And once he's appointed as the leader, his groups of I would call them thugs, but his political army is going to start to certainly hold sway. Remember, two things bringing Hitler and Mussolini to power, Hitler especially: persuasion and intimidation. So far, he's used persuasion. And in many ways, we look at these posters that we'll see of the Sturmabteilung or the Schutzstaffel, and we think that it's intimidation. But in a way, it's also persuasive, because many Germans at this time looking at these things as good things. They support these ideas, and Hitler will be, at least initially especially, a very popular leader in Germany, and people are going to like what he's doing, unfortunately. So he's got certain groups that are going to help him. First of all, we have the brown shirts. They're called the Stormtroopers, or the Sturmabteilung, also known as the SA. They wear the brown shirts, and they are modeled after the World War I Stormtroopers. Now, you might recall that the German Wehrmacht, or army, is allowed to have only 100,000 men. But the Sturmabteilung have almost 4 million men within their ranks. They are far more powerful than even the military itself. So these guys are going to be a very powerful group as Hitler is coming to power. And again, we look at them in a very negative light today, as we should, but Germans at the time, you can see the photo here, Germans at the time, many of them seeing these men that were unemployed, were purposeless before, had no real calling, and now here they are doing things with their lives and waving to them, seeing them as a patriotic force that is serving Germany. At first, it looks like a good thing to many Germans that are voting the Nazis into power. Then another group that's going to come in is called the Schutzstaffel. The Schutzstaffel were elite guardsmen that Hitler actually personally designed their uniforms and intentionally made them black and sexy. He wanted their uniforms black and sexy because the only men that could wear a Schutzstaffel elite guardsman uniform were Aryan men. And they were personally devoted to Hitler, or the Führer, as he will be called, the leader in Germany. And so he's got these sexy Aryan men walking around in these uniforms, and the rule was for the Schutzstaffel that you were supposed to impregnate as many Aryan women as possible. Now, ideally, that could mean it's your wife, and then you've got like 10 kids that are all Aryan babies running around. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be. In fact, the unwritten rule for the Schutzstaffel was, as long as she's Aryan, it's okay. Have as many as you want and get them pregnant. And when they're pregnant, they will be known as the Führer's brides, or the bride of the leader. And the state will actually take care of those women. They won't have to work a job. They'll just be taken care of by the government, because they are Aryan women that are giving us Aryan babies. That's scary, gross stuff, right? The scary, gross man that's in charge of these scary, gross people is Heinrich Himmler. Heinrich Himmler was one of the right-hand men of Hitler, and before the war, before World War I, he was actually a chicken farmer, and he was really a nobody from nowhere. But suddenly he is one of the leaders of the Nazi Party and in this extreme position of power as the leader of the SS. And he's one of the biggest perpetrators and planners of the Holocaust against the Jews. And so Heinrich Himmler is going to be one of the designers of places like Auschwitz. At Auschwitz, he's what we would call a sadomasochist. He's into S&M. It means that you're into weird torture porn. You somehow find sexual joy out of seeing people hurting and in pain. And this is what Heinrich Himmler was like. See, at Auschwitz, he had a little peephole into the gas chambers so that he could witness people dying. When people are getting gunned down by the tens of thousands by the Einsatzgruppen in Eastern Europe during the Holocaust, he personally sat there with a front row seat to watch these naked people being shot into mass graves. He is a nasty weirdo, and he's the guy that's in charge of the SS Schutzstaffel. Now, another group that Hitler was using at this time is called the Geheime Staatspolizei, the Gestapo. Gestapo is actually an acronym because if you look at the name here, Gestapo, which means the secret state police of Germany, the Geheime Staatspolizei, Gestapo, are going to be the guys that kick down your door in the middle of the night and they steal you away and they take you to headquarters and they torture you. The Gestapo is very good at methods of torture and questioning. One of the things that they liked to do was they would take a piece of pliers. They would take some pliers and they would remove your fingernails one at a time. Another thing that they would do is they would take a hammer and break one finger at a time. And another thing that they were big fans of was the simple, terrible, terrifying torture of sitting you naked on a chair and then making sure that your testicles are between your legs, and they would take a ball and chain and thwap the ball beneath yours and put you in intense pain until they would burst. Another terrible thing that they were very good at was torturing people by putting them into freezers and into refrigerators and just leaving them locked in there until they're willing to talk. These are scary, horrible human beings, and these are the men that are in charge of Germany after Hitler comes to power and becomes the dictator. The reason he's able to become dictator, when we start to get more into the intimidation side of things and less persuasive, was because of the Reichstag Fire. Right when Hitler comes to power, he is making all of these bold promises about here's how the Nazis are going to fix things. Well, Germany is still a republic at this time, and so they still have to use a democratic process. And there's the battle between the different political parties that are saying, no, we don't like your ideas, you're a scary fascist, And so in order to try and shut them up, Hitler may have started the Reichstag fire himself. He and his people might have set the government building on fire in order to create this, I call it a 9/11 moment, the moment when the country is shocked by the fact that someone could have attacked our governmental buildings and our people. And so when this fire takes place, Hitler and the Nazis are going to assign all blame to a communist Jew who did it. Okay, they'll say a communist Jew did it, and therefore appealing to people's demagoguery. So they will have this moment where they will vote in March of 1933, in which Hitler will say, we need to suspend democracy with the Enabling Act. The Enabling Act will make it so that the Reichstag no longer has power. There are no longer any other political parties. It's just the Nazis that are going to rule by emergency decree temporarily. All right, we're temporarily going to do away with democracy. Anytime any political leaders say that they're going to temporarily do away with democracy, you know that they're going to become a totalitarian regime, and it's a good chance that we need to overthrow that government at that point, right? The Germans don't know that. Instead, they're looking at this like, okay, well, apparently that's the answer. So after Hitler becomes leader with the Enabling Act, Paul von Hindenburg ends up dying. He's a super old man at this point. He's in his late 80s or his mid 80s. And so Hitler is going to pose it to what's left of the democracy of Germany and say, hey, what do you guys think? Should I be both the president and the chancellor, essentially eliminating all opposition to anything I might do? What do you think, Germans? 90% will say yes. Overwhelmingly, they will say yes. So this leads to Hitler wanting to create a system in which Jews are no longer part of Germany itself. he will slowly start to isolate them through things like the Nuremberg laws. Now, we'll get back to those things later, but another thing that he's going to claim that he will start to do is the creation of a Third Reich. So the First Reich, or the First Empire, was established under Charlemagne, according to the Nazis. The Second German Reich was established under Otto von Bismarck and the Kaiserreich of Germany before World War I. And now the Third Reich, according to Hitler, is going to last 1,000 years. And as it does, they're going to build Germany. Now, this is going to enable Germany to come out of the Great Depression faster than America ever could. And the way he does it, well, let's take a look at this piece of propaganda film from the 1930s.
Stop thinking and follow me, cried Hitler. I will make you masters of the world. And the people answered, Heil! Stop thinking and believe in me, bellowed Mussolini, and I will restore the glory that was Rome. And the people answered, Duce. Stop thinking and follow your God Emperor, cried the Japanese warlords, and Japan will rule the world. And the people answered, Banzai!
So you heard from the totalitarian dictators of the time period, Adolf Hitler is going to say, stop thinking and follow me, and I will make you masters of the world. Stop thinking and follow me, and I will restore the ancient glories that are Rome, said Mussolini. Stop thinking and follow me, and I will make you masters of the universe, unchallenged masters of the universe, says Emperor Hirohito in the warlords of Japan. This is the nature of things in the 1920s and 30s. And America, meanwhile, is back there with FDR trying to create the New Deal and looking at this situation saying, but no one wants to go to war over it. Not yet, anyway. The idea of whether or not this is something that is unique just to Europe, or could it happen here? And as we take a look at some different factors that are happening to Germany, I think it's clear that Germany was ripe for what you'd call a messianic dictator. Certainly, there's room to believe that because of all of the things happening in Europe at this time, Europeans wanted to see a leader that was going to get stuff done. They liked the hyper-nationalism. They liked the uniforms. They liked the appeals to their race as being the chosen race. I mean, who wouldn't want to be in the chosen race, am I right? And so these things are things that are popular ideas, and they're scary because it's so easy that it could happen again. That's why it's so scary, is because this could happen again. And we'll have to get into what happens next in future lessons. So thank you for watching.